Hello, welcome to another Blandford Literary Festival interview. We are lucky enough today to have Jane Duffus with us. She's an author and editor. Hello, Jane. How are you?
Hello, lovely to meet you. Hello.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Now we've got lots to talk about because you have written so many books.
I know.
I,
8.
it's incredible. It's really
Count 'em.
incredible. And obviously, I've had a little look at your website, and all the books are listed there, and it's like, wow, there's so much history as well. So I'm
Mm.
going to start off. Is history your big sort of passion? Are you a real big fan of history?
Yeah, it was social history. So not so much like ancient history, like cave people and what have you, but more kind of the last couple of 100 years, I'd
Mhm.
say people's history. I like the stories of people's lives.
Mm.
I used to live in London. I used to work on lots of lifestyle magazines, the kind of magazines where you'd go around to people's houses and interview them about their babies and their weddings and whatnot. So I like people's stories. I
Mm.
like what people have got to say and what they've done. And everyone's got an interesting story.
Yeah.
Absolutely everyone. They might not think that they do, but they definitely do.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Do you have a favorite era in particular? Decade?
Oh, that's quite tricky. Depends what it's for, doesn't it? I mean, you're going to have to narrow it down by what you
For
want
for
that
your
era to be a favorite thing for.
for your writing, what is your favorite to dig
Oh,
into?
that's quite tricky. I'm very interested in the suffrage movement, and by that,
Mm.
I'm very keen to differentiate between the suffragists, who I love, and
Yeah.
the suffragettes, who I'm a bit more on the fence about. So I'm very keen to make that distinction. But we might come to that a little bit later on.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
absolutely.
find that a really fascinating time and a really interesting period because it's such a pivotal time for women's change, but also at the same time, it's one that's been quite well documented in a time when women's history hasn't been that well documented. That
Yeah,
is one aspect that has been quite well covered,
yeah,
for obvious reasons.
yeah,
But there's just so much interesting stuff. The Industrial Revolution, the period of
yeah.
women working in factory, women going from working at home doing kind of pin work to working in factories. I think
Mm.
that's quite interesting. And then the shift with the factories changing. There's so much going on, and women
Yeah,
have been so pivotal to so much of this. I mean, so many factory workers were women, about 80%.
yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, and
and
that gets
obviously
forgotten, I think.
in the area of obviously Somerset really is where you're based, isn't it? Um,
Well, I live in Bristol. I'm from Somerset originally.
mhm.
I live in Bristol now, but I mean, I'm up and down to Somerset all the time. So
Yeah,
yeah.
but that was very much an industrial area, wasn't it? So you've probably
Well,
had an awful lot
gloving,
to do there.
leather, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
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 and
that's what I was
cheese.
thinking.
It
Yeah.
was all going on in Somerset.
And obviously you wrote a three-book series, The Women Who Built Bristol.
Yeah.
Just tell us a little bit about that, because obviously three books,
Yeah. Do you
there's
want
a
me to
lot of
wave them at
women.
you?
Oh,
They've
yes,
got
please.
such lovely covers, and I do believe you should always judge a book by its cover.
Yes,
So we
absolutely.
all do. I mean, let's be honest, we all do. So it's volume one, which has a
Oh,
lovely pink
fab.
cover. They're in the wrong order. Volume two has a nice bluish kind of cover. Right, they don't always have my name scribbled on the top. It's only because these are my copies that I write on. So I just wanted to make sure I didn't actually sell these copies to someone. And then volume three, which came out about 10 months ago, which has
Oh,
a sort of
lovely.
greenish cover.
And do you keep
Um,
the same illustrator for those
well,
books?
the first two are done by a Finnish artist called
Hmm.
Titu Takalo.
All right.
Hope I'm saying her name right. I'd found this illustration years before the book came out. I found it as a postcard and I really loved it. And I always had it pinned up above my desk. And I had it in my head that if I ever did a book on women's history, I wanted that illustration for the cover. I
Yeah.
tracked her down. I've never met her. I tracked her down online, contacted her, told her what I was doing, and she very fortunately agreed to, for me to pay her a sum of money to use the book on the cover. And so she did
Fantastic.
the second cover as well. But then for the third one, I kind of thought, as much as I love Titu's illustrations, I thought I
Mm.
really ought to be using a Bristol artist.
Yeah.
And so I worked with someone called Tina Altweg, who it is a Swiss name, but she lives in Bristol and has done
Mm.
for a long, long time. And so I'm working with Tina now ongoing, who's fab and has done three covers now for me with some
Um,
books that are forthcoming. Well, so
yeah.
it's kind of great to have that relationship with her
No,
too.
absolutely, absolutely. So Tell us a little bit more about the series, across the
Mm.
three books.
Yeah. So each book has 250 different women in it. So that's 750 across the three. Now, people always kind of pull that face that you've just pulled and go, God, that's a lot. But
Yes,
I
it's
don't
not.
think it is, because technically the books cover roughly about 1,000 years.
Oh,
And so
wow.
that's not even one woman a year. And while
Yeah.
I grant you, the majority of those women are in the last 300 to 400 years for
Yeah.
obvious reasons, there are some women that kind of go further back, which is
Yeah.
why I'm kind of pushing those dates a little bit. But the reason I started doing it was because it was just so hard to find
Mm.
stories about women or to be told stories about women.
Yeah.
You know, I often say I do a lot of talks, and at the beginning of the talk, I say, the reason I started writing the books is that because I used to be a magazine journalist writing about people's real life stories and real life people. And then I came to Bristol. I moved from London to Bristol, and I wanted to know about the people who lived here.
Mm.
So I did the obvious things of going to the museums and reading some of the existing history books. At that time, I wasn't looking for stories about women, which was just as well, but because it became really obvious that we were just being told the men's history. And
Yeah.
I found that infuriating. And that's not just true of Bristol, that's true of absolutely
Yeah.
everywhere. I mean, there have been in the last 10 years or so, there has been a bit of a change towards that. Other
Mm.
people of a similar sort of generation and vintage to me are coming along and being equally frustrated about this in
Mm.
whatever place it is that they happen to live in, which is great, and we definitely need that to happen.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, I would also say that although the books are called The Women Who Built Bristol, they're not just, the tales within that could apply to anywhere, really.
Yeah.
Excuse me. There's stories about amazing, courageous women in all kinds of different eras and all kinds of different industries. And,
Yeah.
I think I mean, I'm biased, obviously, but I think there's something for everyone in those books. I'm biased.
Well, you say 750, and I'm a bit of a naughty person. I will ask you to narrow down. Is there anyone that really stood out for you who you couldn't stop thinking about, put you on
Yeah.
the spot and say, who is that person?
Well, I do often get asked, as you might imagine, who's my favorite? And
Yeah.
it's quite tricky to pick a favorite
Yeah.
out of 750. I've got two.
Yeah.
I've got
Okay.
two. One is a woman called Mary Griffiths, who's in volume two. And in 1864, I hope I've got that date right, she was the very first civilian to cross the Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol on foot. Now, on the opening ceremony, I mean, we're all familiar with whether
Yeah.
you live in Bristol or not, you are familiar with the Clifton Suspension Bridge, a very grand piece of engineering. And it was a grand occasion, the opening. About 10,000 people turned up and stood at both sides of the gorge. And of course, only dignitaries had previously crossed it on foot or people in cars, and then it was unveiled. But this young woman called Mary Griffiths, she was 21, she worked as a barmaid. This is the other thing I really love, so say ordinary women. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, it's great people who wrote books and founded schools and invented the
Yeah.
women's police force. Those are all great women, but I also really want to celebrate ordinary women. So the fact that she was a barmaid, I think, is also really interesting and something
Yeah.
to remark upon. But she wanted to be the first person to cross it on foot. She turned up, she had her uncle with her for support, and just before the ribbon was officially cut, she ducked underneath, hitched up her long Victorian skirts, and started running. But there was another young man who'd had the same idea, and he was a few paces behind her. So she had her uncle shouting, "Run, Mary, run!" And so she pulls up her skirts and she runs as fast as she can. And she does get to the other side just before this guy, which is great.
Oh.
And she pays her one penny toll with pleasure, and now her name is recorded, and that's fantastic.
Oh, I like
And
that. That's a
yeah,
great
it's great.
story. Yeah, good for
It's a great
her.
story. Good for her. And another one, again, sticking with the so say ordinary woman, we've got May Whitby, who's in volume three, and her story's quite long. I'll try and keep it short here. But essentially, on the face of it,
Mm.
she's someone who goes to the cinema and works in a cigarette factory. That's the face of her story. But really, oh my goodness, out of 750 women, she's one of my faves. So this is in about 1910, roughly, that we join her story. She's a big fan of the cinema. She lives in a very poor area of Bristol. She's from a very poor kind of family that don't have much. But her real treat is going to the cinema. And this is in the silent era of cinemas,
Yeah.
remember. So she'll save up her pennies and she'll sit on the wooden seats at the back, and she loves it. There's these two older women who come to the cinema and they recognize her as a regular cinema fan, but they can't read and they know that she can read. And so they say to her that they will pay for her cinema tickets and she can come and sit with them in the nice comfy area of the cinema so long as she reads out all the title cards to them. Because of course silent cinema has all
Yeah.
those cards and that have bits of dialogue, or it might, tell you that the location has moved from England to Spain or something,
Yeah.
or that the time has jumped forward 10 years, or it might, whatever it is, it's
Mm.
something that progresses the narrative. And if you can't read, then
Yeah.
you're missing a chunk of the film and you're excluded from that. And of course, that's a lot of people at that era who
Mm.
aren't able to read for one
Yeah.
reason or another. So this is a great arrangement. And then, of course, there comes a point where she can't keep going to the cinema. She has to go to work, and she gets a job at one of the tobacco factories in Bristol. And it's not a very exciting job. She's just in a packing department, putting boxes in boxes and those boxes in bigger boxes all day in, day out.
Mm.
And radios in workplaces aren't a thing at this point. Radio, if it has been invented, is very fledgling. So
Yeah.
these women are just sat there in their factory room doing drudge work over and over again. So they chat to entertain themselves. But in the evenings, while all her colleagues, or most of her colleagues, like going out to dances and perhaps looking for young men to meet, May doesn't do that. She's not interested. She goes to the library. She likes taking out books and reading novels in the evening. So the next day she comes to work and she entertains her colleagues with the stories that she's read in her books the previous night.
Oh,
And so they can't wait for her to come back the next day and tell her the next few chapters. And then she gets loaned out to different departments around the factory to entertain different departments. And I just think
wow.
this is great. This is a young woman from a poor family who doesn't seemingly have a lot going on for her, but she's made a career or a life out of herself as a reader, whether it's
Yeah.
reading in the cinema and sharing those stories with people who otherwise are left out of a chunk of the
Yeah.
story, or it's reading to people that she works with. And I just think, what a fantastic story.
That's
I
so
love May,
lovely.
really
Yeah, no,
love
that
May.
is because I've got to be honest with you. I mean, I love listening to people reading, if I'm honest.
She's an
Audio
early
books and
version
what
of an
things.
audiobook.
It is. Do you know that's exactly what I was going to say? She was ahead of her time.
She was.
Because I'd imagine I've got a picture of her in my head, really putting effort into the characters and to everything. I think that's lovely.
Well,
What a
I met
lovely story.
someone who had met May Whitby, and it was like they'd told me they'd met George Clooney or something. I was like, oh my God, you met May Whitby. And I couldn't believe it. I said, what was she like? And this was in the late 80s. They met her when she was quite an elderly lady by this
Yeah.
point. And they said she said when she came in the room, when she came in the room, you knew about it. She was quite a short figure. But she carried a lot of presence with her
Yeah.
and quite an
Yeah.
air of no nonsense, quite
Yeah.
authoritative. I was
Yeah.
thinking, yeah, I bet she did.
Yeah, I bet she did. I bet she did. Did you
Yeah.
feel you had a connection with her as well? Because am I right in saying you've got an MA in cinema studies?
Yeah, and I felt really, I have an MA in cinema studies and I wrote my thesis on early silent cinema or an
Oh,
aspect of
right.
early silent cinema. Although the aspect I wrote on was the transition of how you write, how you've become a silent film writer and how you try to transition to become a writer for sound,
Mm,
which of course is very different. But I was really ashamed when I came across May's story that at no point, it had never occurred to me, which I'm really appalled about how people who couldn't read, and of course, as I said, a lot of
yeah.
people couldn't read at this point,
Yeah.
how they would navigate silent cinema. And this was
Mm,
something that had never, ever come up before.
no.
I spent a year doing this MA and doing a lot on silent cinema. I've watched a lot of cinema since then and been involved with various silent cinema groups. And it's never something that's come up. And then reading May's story, I was like, wow, that
Yeah.
really is a case of, in modern day parlance, check your privilege.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are really staggering because it's such an obvious thing.
Yeah.
Once you think about it, it's like that's really obvious.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really lovely, two very, very good people that you've picked out of
Mm,
750. So, yeah, thank you for that. Now, moving on, because obviously you've got a new publication coming out, haven't you? And
I
that's The Women Who
do.
Won the Vote.
I do, and I'm going to show you. I haven't got the book yet because it's not back from the printers, but I do have these beautiful cards. I don't know if you can see them very well,
That's
which is the
lovely.
cover of the book. Obviously,
Yeah,
it'll have nice words above it, but the
yeah.
cover was so lovely. And as I said, we do like to judge a book by its cover. The cover of this one was just so fantastic that I said to Tina, the artist, we've got to do this as a card. And of
Yeah.
course, we have. And they've literally just arrived this afternoon. So I'm stoked about that. But yeah, The Women Who Won the Vote, it's a bookette, I'm calling it. And
Yeah.
despite what I said earlier, it's about the suffragettes.
Right.
And I've said to Tina when she was described, when I was commissioning her for the cover,
Yeah.
and so it's about this family of four women from near Bath, but they were involved in the national campaign. And so it's a mother and her three daughters, and they're just completely excluded largely from all the other, and I've read a lot of books about the suffrage campaign, and they do kind of appear, but only ever as a sentence, a
Mm,
throwaway sentence in other people's stories. And I found that extraordinary. And I found them quite a long time ago. They do appear in volume one of The Women Who Built Bristol as quite a short entrance, but I kept coming across them in here, there, and everywhere.
mm,
And I started digging around and I found they were fascinating. They were born in India, as a lot of people were,
mm,
people from a clergy family back in the sort of 1860s, 1870s. They moved and bought this grand house in on the edge of Bath Easton in the 1890s, and then their father died quite shortly into his retirement. And while, of course, this was very sad for the family, it also freed them up financially and socially to do whatever they wanted. They didn't need to work. They weren't from the kind of family that would have worked. They were cushioned financially. They had this beautiful house with beautiful grounds to live in, and they threw themselves into the suffrage movement to varying degrees. Mother Frances really threw, she was the householder, so she owned the house, and as such, she became very involved in the no taxation
mm.
or no vote, no taxation. So she didn't pay her taxes as a homeowner in having making a stand. If you won't give me the vote, I'm not going to pay my taxes. And every year there would be, the government, sorry, would seize property from her house, auction it off. Someone else from the campaign would buy it back immediately and give it to her. Because the point was that she could have afforded to pay it. It wasn't that she didn't
Yeah.
want to pay it or she didn't have the money. It was the principle of the thing.
Yeah.
And there would be, as there were with all suffrage things, there would be huge processions and a lot of fanfare and a lot of spectacle. So
Mm,
there we've got Mother Frances doing this well into her 70s. And then we've got daughters Mary, Frances, and Ethel. Mary's the only one who marries. She marries a clergyman and she goes to live in Windsor, but they're still very involved in the suffrage movement, but from a very respectable, peaceful, law-abiding fashion.
yeah.
Because obviously he's quite a senior member in the clergy in Windsor, so he can't get up to too much trouble, but he
Yeah.
does support his wife and his family. They do come to lots of meetings, they do support them. Grace and Ethel are the two really interesting ones. They're the two unmarried daughters and sisters. They live into the 1950s. And they both become militant suffragettes.
Mm,
Ethel much more so than Grace. They're involved with the WSPU, the Women's Social and Political Union, which is the organisation run by the Pankhurst family. They're involved with that nationally. They have lots of members like Emmeline Pankhurst, Annie Kenny come to stay with them. They host huge garden parties. They both get arrested numerous times. They spend time in Holloway. They do hunger strikes. They're not forcibly fed, but they're just extraordinary. And then after the war and after Francis has died, they become very involved in the agriculture movement during the war. They don't want to stop militant. They don't want to stop campaigning for votes for women, but they recognise that during the war, different tactics are needed. So they get
yeah.
involved with agriculture, with encouraging women to grow their own food and vegetables to become self-sufficient. They're vegetarians. They're very adamant about the importance of vegetarianism. They're very anti-vivisection. They're very progressive in a lot of their
Yeah,
beliefs.
I
They're
was going
very
to say
involved
they
with the
are.
early they're very involved with the early Labour Party. They throw open their house to the Labour Party to come and have weekends there. The BBC hosts performances of theatrical shows, hosts them on the radio, broadcast radio from there. They open their house up as a vegetarian guest house, and then later it becomes one of the very first youth hostels in the country until the
Wow.
1950s. There's so much. They're swimmers. They're advanced wild swimmers. They're trying to advocate to teach people swimming in the river at the end of their garden. There's so much about them. They're just
Yeah.
incredible. So I'm calling it a suffragette bookette. It's not a full-length book. It's about 64 pages.
Yeah.
But it's got 10 beautiful photographs as well as the lovely cover.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love them. I really do
Yeah.
love them. They're just incredible women.
That's
Sorry, I rambled
fantastic.
on a
No,
bit
you
there.
didn't. It's really good because you get introduced only through like chatting with you today that we get introduced to families and people that we may not have heard of before.
Yeah.
So I
And I
think it is
think the thing with
interesting.
the Tollmash is, and this is true, I think for a lot, it's my dog yawning in the background, sorry. And I think this is true, probably just in case you picked that up. I think this is true for a lot of women, is Ethel and Grace didn't marry, and so they
Hmm.
didn't have children. And so I think their story has died with them. I
Yeah.
don't know. I've been unable to find where all their scrapbooks and, their diaries have ended up, if they've survived at all. I don't know where those are, which is a massive shame because they would have, I know that it did have them. It's recorded that they did keep them, but
Yeah.
where they've ended up, I just don't know. And I
Oh
hope they
my
haven't just
gosh. Yeah,
been
that must
scrapped or
be
binned
quite
somewhere.
frustrating because
It's
you
really
would really want to
frustrating.
get into those, wouldn't you? You
They
know?
would be brilliant.
Mm.
I mean, the other thing that I didn't mention is that they became involved in a Hindu peace movement, and
Oh,
they
really?
opened up their property to a Swami from India, who came and lived there for 30, 40 years
Oh,
after their
wow.
death. And he ran the British arm of the Vedanta movement for peace from their property, which of course really aligned to their principles. He
Yeah.
was a supporter of Mahatma Gandhi. He had worked with Gandhi in India. He'd been arrested in India a number of times for his campaigning for peace. So he really aligned to their beliefs
Yeah.
for peace. And they had the shared experience of having been imprisoned in different countries. They'd obviously grown up in India. They spent the first 10, 12 years of their lives in India. So there were a lot of connections and it made a lot of
Yeah.
sense. And Vedanta stayed there until the 1970s in the property, long after the sisters had died. So
Oh,
really fascinating
yeah,
story.
that
The whole
is. That's
place. The house in
incredible.
itself is a character in the story.
Have you actually been to the house at all? Is it somewhere
No,
that you
I
can
I
go?
really want to. I have tried contacting the woman who lives in the property
Mm.
now, but as yet I haven't been able to get a response. So I don't know if that's just because she doesn't want to know or she thinks this is my house, or I don't know. But I hope
Oh,
one day
yeah.
I'd love to go there. It's a private house though
Send her a
now, so
copy. Send her a copy
yeah,
of the book,
yeah,
Jane, with a little invite. Can I please come?
yeah. It's a private house though, so you obviously have to
Yeah.
respect that
Yeah,
it's someone's
absolutely.
home. But I'd
Absolutely.
love to one day if it was
Oh
possible.
my God. You're so passionate about what you talk. It really comes across, the way that you describe these characters who are real life characters. Um, Now obviously you're coming to talk at the Blandford Literary Festival International
Yes,
Women's Day on
looking
March the
forward to it.
7th. And you're doing a talk, and I don't want you to go into too much detail about this because I don't want to ruin the surprise for
No.
people who are coming. But it's hidden from history until now. Is there
Mm.
anything you can tell us without telling us too much?
Well, what I'm planning to do is just to give a sort of smorgasbord, as it were, of some of the amazing women that I've come across. I mean, I'm sure I will talk about the Tolmash women in more detail as well. Um, I just want to introduce some of these women because although, as I said, the books are called The Women Who Built Bristol, but the stories within them
Mm,
resonate all over the place and have
yeah.
national significance. So I'm going to introduce some of these women to the
Mhm.
audience and share their exciting stories, share my passion for them, share my enthusiasm, and hopefully get people excited or maybe keen to dig around into their own family histories and see who they
Yeah.
can unearth. The other day I was talking to someone in my running group locally, and I was telling her about the women who built the women who won the vote book,
Mm.
and she went away and she took a photograph from her mum's house and sent it to me, and it was a photograph of a suffragette sash, the Votes for Women sash,
Yeah.
and they'd had framed, and she said, "Oh, this was my auntie's," and I was like, "Oh my God, who was your auntie?" And then I went away and looked her up and tried to find some stories about her.
That
So
would be
you
brilliant.
just don't know what people have
Yeah.
until you
And
start chatting to them. You don't know
exactly. And
what's
the thing
there.
is, them hearing how you've discovered all these women, like you say, people in the audience might be sitting there thinking, oh, what about my grandparents, or what did my mother
Yeah,
do? And like you say,
exactly.
everyday women, you know, running across a bridge, hitching up their skirt,
Yeah.
they could have been them. So I
Fascinating. But often people do get in touch with me. I mean, I get several emails a month from people getting in touch and they've read the books and saying, "Do you know about so and so? She was my great great auntie."
yeah,
And it's like, wow. And you won't hear about these people
yeah,
unless someone gives you a nudge. And
yeah.
so it's great that they do. I love it.
Oh, one quick question off the back of what you've
Mm.
just said there. Is there going to be a book four then? Is it because you keep finding out about more and more
Mm.
women? Is there the possibility of a book four?
Oh, well, I mean, what I'm doing next is The Women Who Built Bath, which is coming out in
Oh, right.
September.
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
nearly finished. That's pretty much finished. So I'm going to park Bristol for now. I mean, that's
Yeah.
not due to a shortage of women. I've
I
got about
was going to say,
450
don't
more women sitting on a spreadsheet for Bristol. But I'm
worry.
going to park that for now. And we may come back to it in the future. Who knows? So The Women Who Built Bath, which follows the same principle, is coming out in September.
Yeah.
And again, we'll have another beautiful cover from Tina.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm really excited about that. It's been really fun over the last year or two, exploring a different city
Yeah.
and exploring all kinds of extraordinary things. And again, they're not just women who who have a story that's interesting to Bath. I think their stories are extraordinary. Like there's an architect who she was an amazing Art Deco architect, and she designed the most beautiful fire station that you've
Yeah.
ever seen. And I'm really heartbroken in the last couple of weeks. It's just there was a campaign to save it, but unfortunately, it's just been granted permission to be knocked down, which is
Oh
awful.
no.
And I understand that the building was built 100 odd years ago and it's no longer fit for the way that the fire
Yeah.
service runs now. But couldn't they just have kept the front and then changed the
Yeah.
interior?
Yeah.
But anyway,
Oh,
I'm
I'm
not
with
the one
you
who
on
makes
that.
these
I'm with you
decisions.
on that. Oh, well,
And there was
you
this,
never know. We might, with you coming along to the Blandford Literary Festival on International Women's Day, we might find some ladies with some stories that we can maybe
oh, I
have.
hope
The
so.
women who built Blandford. That would be
Oh, I'm
fabulous.
spreading my wings. Don't worry. The women in the
Absolutely.
Southwest is coming. I'm from Yeovil
Oh,
originally,
right. Okay.
and so I have an ongoing project. I want to do something about the women who built Yeovil, and I will spread that out because Yeovil's not the biggest place in the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
and it does have some crackers though. The very first woman in the entire country who voted was from Yeovil,
Oh, there you
which was
go.
a mistake. So Francis Connolly's. That's quite a fun story. But there's loads of other ones. So I might get like Sherborne and some other and Crookert and
Yeah,
Hartog and other
absolutely.
places, and perhaps Blandford in there as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
I might kind of do like Women of the West Country that kind of catches some of those other market towns around there as
Absolutely.
well.
That'd
Because
be
I'm very
great.
much a West Country girl, so these
Yeah.
are my roots.
Absolutely. My God. Well, we can't wait to have you. I'm gonna stop you there because I want you to save as much as possible for March the 7th. And if anybody would
Perfect.
like to come along, obviously we've got a free ticket option of mornings, afternoons, or all day. But you are going to be on at 11:30 till 12:30, aren't you, Jane?
I am indeed. And I will have books to buy if anyone
Oh,
wants to buy
fantastic.
them. Cash
Fantastic.
and
And
card,
them
all
cards
welcome.
and your little cards as well. Will you be
And I'll
bringing
have
them?
some cards and I'll have the women who were the women who, well, I can't speak. The women who won the vote booklets will be back by then as well. So
Fantastic.
it's all to play for.
How exciting.
And I'll
Thank
have
you
my signing
so
pen.
much. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's been
Thank you.
fascinating. And I could just go on and on and on with you and listen to so many stories. So I shall be there listening to you at your talk, which was
Fab.
hidden from history until now. I can't wait. Can't wait. It's going to be fab. Jane, thank you ever so much for your time, and we will speak
Thank
to you
you.
soon. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.